G'day everyone, welcome back to the Big Bros podcast. My name is Jeremy. Welcome if it's your first time joining us on the show. I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host Ilan. How are we, mate?
I'm pretty good, man. How are you?
Great, mate. Really excited to dive into this one. Today we're talking about the biggest learnings we've learned since really starting this podcast. We're about 2.5 years in now. The biggest learnings we've learned both from different lenses. One being how we feel, maybe we've grown and the strengths that we've gained, and also the challenges that we've also faced and how we're going about facing those. But at the end of the day, they're all good learnings and things that have really changed us as humans as well.
Quickly, you sound like a Simon Goodwin press conference talking about all these learnings. So the only difference between this is because we've actually done something with those learnings.
Exactly.
And the Melbourne Football Club hasn't. And the reason I'm really salty is because I don't even know when this is going to be released, but this episode was recorded the day after Melbourne gave up a 46-point lead to St Kilda in the third quarter. So I'm pretty ropeable.
Pretty raw and vulnerable.
So you say the word learnings and it just sets me off. But I'm going to ask you one thing, Jeremy. You talk a lot about resilience on its own meaning nothing. What does that mean? And why has that been a big shape shift in your beliefs?
Yeah, well, shout out to our man Danny Kennedy, where we spoke a lot about this and the other learnings, which we'll talk about. We spoke a lot about this on his show. We appeared on his show, the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. So go check it out if you haven't yet. And this was something that I spoke about there a fair bit, which was resilience to a task, to something, to anyone does not exist without having love. You cannot be resilient towards something in life without having a love for it. This is the number one thing that I have learned since starting the podcast. I don't think I've ever been so unrelenting and dedicated towards a task in my life without maybe having the immediate impact, or seeing the immediate impact, or having the immediate gratification, and just doing something because I truly loved it, so much so that it didn't matter how anyone else would interact with it. It was doing it because I love to do it. And so this is what the podcast has taught me in the last 2.5 years, that you can only continue to persevere with something if you truly love it. Because if I didn't love this, if I didn't see the value in it for myself and for the people that listen to it, then I would have stopped long ago. And that's why you see so many podcasts and so many projects fail to continue. And in the podcast world, I think it's like 90% of podcasts stop after the first 7 episodes or some crazy stat like that. And it's because there's maybe not that undercurrent or that deep core value of love and dedication and desire to do it. A lot of people just do things in life because they see other people doing it. That's our tendency as humans. We like to follow. We like to just do what goes with the grain. And podcasting now is one of those things that is almost with the grain. It's not so much against the grain as what it used to be. It's a very common thing, and it really tests your level of dedication to a task if you don't love it. So you have to love something, and that goes with relationships too. It goes with a pursuit of any kind, academically, a hobby that you like to do. You have to really love it if you really keep on wanting to do it, or you keep on wanting to do it because you love it, especially during times that are testing, especially during times where you're not getting the immediate gratification, you're not getting the immediate reward, because it's so easy to do something and get some followers and maybe get some money initially and think, hey, this is great, this is easy. And that's where I know you and I have spoken about it, Ilan, that it's grinded our gears sometimes, especially in the podcast world, where you see someone that starts a podcast after already having 100,000 followers, and they complain about how the first 6 months was so hard and they were getting no listens. It's like, mate, you already had such a huge following to start off with. So, just stop trying to have a sob story. And this isn't a sob story. It's just more so a story about realism and life and what we've experienced.
On your point about resilience, I think I've just been kind of psychoanalyzing the hell out of you for a second before. And
You can't help it, mate.
I can't help it. It's a pathology for me. But something that I thought about is that we can have resilience for something if it gives us a sense of purpose and meaning. And that clearly the podcast is that vehicle which provides a sense of purpose and meaning for us. Because there's a saying that goes that if you give a man a purpose, they will climb over broken glass with a smile on their face to get it. And I think that speaks to a lot of things in life, because truthfully, there's going to be things in life where you don't necessarily need to be resilient for, and it's because it's useless. Like if I had a task that I gave myself every day, which was take my socks off and stomp on Lego pieces that are going to absolutely damage my foot, I can continuously do that every day and be resilient against the pain. But it's not going to give me a sense of purpose and meaning unless I'm masochistic and I want to hurt myself. But the point is, in life, you've got to find something where you have to ask yourself, what is worth being resilient for?
Yeah.
And usually the questions and the answers tend to reveal themselves. It will be things like for your family, for your friends, for your career, specifically which area of your career that brings you meaning and purpose. But more or less, you'll learn what is worth being resilient for. Exercise, health, fitness. You have to be resilient. There's going to be days where you don't want to do what you have to do, but you do it nonetheless because it gives you a sense of meaning and purpose.
What have you learnt, mate?
That imposter syndrome never goes away. You just get better at telling it to fuck off. And what I mean by that is our automatic beliefs, our software, it's always going to creep in and give us a thought that's not very helpful. It might give us a thought and an inner monologue that tells us you're not good enough. Why are you getting behind a microphone? Why are you doing anything? And obviously when you haven't done it before, it's fair enough you're going to be feeling like an imposter, because you are. But over time, you have enough evidence to tell that imposter voice to shut up, because I've done it for 2.5 years now with yourself. And it doesn't just extend to this, but evidence is your best friend if you want to tell your imposter syndrome to be quiet. And some people might say, well, I feel like an imposter before I do anything. My response would be, probably because you are.
You should feel that way.
But you're always going to feel like an imposter. So what do? You try to accumulate as much countervailing evidence as you can in order to explain to that imposter syndrome voice that I acknowledge you, I hear you, but I'm still going to do it anyway. And that goes the same with things like being confident. You can choose to be confident. You can pick a day where you wake up and say, I'm going to be confident today. And you might not have much evidence, but that evidence will start to present itself as soon as you get into that mindset. So someone might say, well, what does it look like to be confident? Visualize. What would a confident person look like to you?
And then do it.
And go and chat
step.
GPT and say, this is who I am as a person. I want to visualize. This is what I visualized what a confident version of Ilan would look like. Give me a task today that can embody that confidence and make it so realistic, make it a SMART goal so that you are more likely to complete it, and have enough of those goals that end up supporting the fact that you're confident today. But it starts with you deciding it, right?
Well, that leads me to my second biggest learning for me personally, and that is all about confidence. It's a topic that I've always loved and I've always grappled with and I've always thought about, and the beliefs will probably always change and forever evolve, but I think I'm really happy with how I define confidence now and what it means to me, and that is the belief that you are what you say you are based on the actions that you do. That is what confidence is. I used to think that confidence is just doing things and thinking I will be okay no matter what happens. And I'm pretty sure that I've spoken about this earlier in the podcast. It might have been a year ago now where I defined confidence and I said confidence is knowing that you'll be okay in the moment. No matter what that moment is, you know that you'll be okay. I think that my belief now has really changed since then. And I think that it's really based on evidence. You can't go into a room and say you'll be okay no matter what happens, because if you've never gone into that room before and you don't know what is going to come your way, how the fuck can you feel confident that you know you will act in a certain way in that environment because you don't have the reps and you don't have the evidence to know that you will act in a certain way. But rather it's the latter. It's knowing that you have done the work in this situation before. So you now know how to act when being put in that situation again. That is confidence. That is true confidence. It's the action that you do constantly over and over again where you build up that callus, like going to the gym. You've built up that callus over a long period of time, and you can then safely say, I understand this. I know what to do. I am confident in this task. And that doesn't mean that you have to be doing the task for 2.5 years like we've done, but it means that you have to have done the task enough times so that you can trust and say to yourself, I wholeheartedly know that I know what to do in this situation. I know that when I step into the gym, I know how to perform in the gym. I know that when I step behind the microphone and sit behind the microphone, I know how to manufacture and construct this podcast. It's knowing that you've done this a certain amount of times that is good enough for you to feel that way. And the more you just keep doing that, the more your confidence builds in that task. And the next point is that I feel like confidence is transferable. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to build up those tasks in a lot of different tasks to feel that confidence across the board, but rather if, for example, you feel confident in being a podcaster because you've done it a lot of times, and you feel confident in your speaking and your speech because you've done it a lot, then I feel like the confidence that you've gained from that is then transferable to a task like public speaking, for example, like maybe talking in front of a crowd that you might not be too familiar with, because you're thinking back to, well, what is the foundational thing that you're doing there? And that is your speech, that is your talking. Yes, the environment is different, but the fundamental practice of talking, you're confident in doing that.
Something I really like about that is that if confidence is transferable, it ultimately means you had to develop it in one domain, which ultimately gave you a global sense of confidence that I can complete activities. And if I can complete these range of activities, chances are I can complete another whole heap. One thing I do want to add to that is when I say you can choose to be confident, I don't mean that you have to fake and force yourself to feel confident. What I mean by that is you can do a behavior and an action that would embody what confidence means to you.
Yeah.
Because the feeling is subsequent to the behavior. I can't stress that enough. Dopamine and endorphins is subsequent to the workout. It doesn't precede it. And I think that's how you should look at confidence as well. Going on a different note, something I have learned is whilst we have very good friends and we have a lot of friends that want us to succeed, you will find that even your best mates will give you unsolicited advice on a product they don't even invest their time into. I don't mean that in a rude way, but what I do mean is I think, and maybe I'd be guilty of this if this was my own friend, but I think as humans, we feel the need, or as friends, we feel the need to always criticize or provide constructive feedback because we feel like we might help that person out. And there's nothing wrong with that. Something I've realized though is you don't always need to take someone's feedback on board. And there's a real skill.
Take it personally.
Yeah, and I've never taken it necessarily personally, but I think we all have to a certain extent, but something I think that's quite important is understanding that even if they want your product to do well, their criticism and feedback needs to be taken with a grain of salt. And what I mean by that is this is your baby ultimately. Other people can tell you how to be a better parent, but if you are very confident in your ways and you have all the evidence to suggest that your current parenting method is the right one, why would you listen to anyone else? I think it's also very natural to get annoyed at those people. And you said that it can feel almost personal for you. What do you mean by that?
What strikes a chord sometimes is when you get criticism from people that you would expect would show support for you, and they don't show the support for you, and they only show criticism. We've got great friendship group, as you've said, but I feel like the friends that give us criticism and do it in a way that is very actionable, we fucking love that. That is great. That is like what a true friend is. That is someone that says, you know, maybe I think you could be doing this a little bit better. This is how, like, I would say you should do it. And, you know, we sit down and we talk about it, and it comes from a place of love. But on the contrary, it's, you know, it feels a little bit more personal, where it's someone that just says, you know, you're doing something that I disagree with, but maybe they haven't like actually, like you said, invested in the product, listen to the product for a long time, so they don't actually know what they're saying, or it just doesn't feel like it's from a sense of love. And, you know, at first I used to take that really personally. I still do to an extent now sometimes, but I've learned that it's, you know, I've learned that it's more of a reflection of the person. If they wanted to give you that criticism, that is so great and that is so fine, but do it in a way that is being a bit proactive and inviting actionable change, because that's what anyone would want that wants to get better. You want to hear criticism, but you want to hear it from a place of, this person actually does give a shit, and I can see that they give a shit. They're not just telling you you're bad or you're shit at something without providing some hope for change.
I get the intuitive feeling that the people, and I could be wrong, but I get the feeling that the people who never speak well of the product, and this doesn't have to go for our podcast, but let's say you're starting your own creative venture and you've got a group of friends or so-called friends, and they're telling you that your product needs to do better in this domain, but they've never given you positive feedback. There's always a bit of an alarm bell that goes off in my head that thinks, do they on a subconscious level just not want you to succeed? And that's a very common thing, and they might not be even conscious of that. And it's very different to those people who, for example, listen to, I'm not saying every episode, or they comment on everything or like everything. That's fine, but there's a stark energy difference, because the people who actually do care will give you balanced feedback, because not everything is always all good and not everything is all bad. There's always room for improvement. But to say that if there's room for improvement, there's also maybe an acknowledgement that you have improved on some things and that your product is good in other ways. And I think this is not to shit on those friends specifically, but it's just to say that human nature is a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
And the people that you think might get on board the most might not be. And sometimes people will ask you questions and it'll shit you off, because you're thinking, out of anyone, why do you think that you're asking me a legitimately good question? When if you were in the same position, you'd be so useless, let's say. So everyone wants to give advice. Everyone thinks their advice is the best. And sometimes the people that believe that their advice is the best, they wouldn't actually practice it if they were in your shoes. So I think it's important to recognize that as well.
Yeah. I think on the flip side of that, and leading into kind of the opposite of that, I think something that we've certainly learned, and it's something that you're so appreciative of it when you're actually doing this and you're in this space of whatever space it is that you're really trying to pursue, you know, on your own accord, is the support that you do get from loved ones around you means the fucking world. You know, just even if it's like a comment, a like, a text message, something to just recognize that they have seen something that you've done and they say, you know, well done for that. It's gone a long way for us, and it gives you that little bit of fire in times that might feel a bit challenging. It gives you that hope that you should keep going at times where you might feel like you've got some doubts and self-doubts, because we're all human. And yes, I speak about resilience and love, but you know, you still doubt certain things at times, and you think, okay, well, you know, how good is it really? And so just feeling that love and appreciation from those loved ones really goes a long way. And we don't forget those people, and we never will forget those people. And it's really just taught me the lesson of how important it is to just support your mates. As simple as that sounds, really just support your mates. I know that if I was seeing anything that a mate of mine was pursuing, and they were doing it because they've got a love for it and a dedication towards a certain task, I would support them and give them that love and like their stuff without even fucking thinking about it, because I know how much it means to me when I receive that in turn. And that's not to toot my own horn or anything, but it really just makes sense now when, you've done this for a certain amount of time and you can see the flip side, and you can see what it feels like when you don't get that support, and what it feels like on the other side when you do get that support.
And mate, when you get strangers on the other side of the world saying, I listened to episode 74 and it was about a topic that we covered, and it could have been the most niche thing we mentioned, and they tell you they did this for a few weeks and it had considerable benefits in their life.
Yeah.
That's when it really is the pinch me moments. And that's kind of why we do the podcast, is to help someone, maybe whether it's in our community or overseas, do something that will hopefully improve their life. And I can speak from experience on this podcast. I find that I can't come on here and not necessarily preach, but share a perspective about something unless I'm willing to do it in my own personal life. I can't show up here and say, yeah, go to gym, eat clean, eat healthy, but not actually practice what I preach, because it would come off as disingenuous, right?
Yeah.
So something I've been really, and maybe I've never revealed this on the podcast, but something I've been very consistent with is not talking about something on this potty that I wouldn't do in my personal life. So I would never come on this podcast and say, never drink again in your life, because, I enjoy having a drink here and there. Right? But what I will tell you to do is try and take care of your mental health, because A, I'm in the profession that tries to help people with their mental health, and B, I try to do things that support my own mental health. And for me, that's been a huge thing, because one of the big themes you and I have spoken about, and it has been a learning, is how to become more authentic, right? And being authentic in who you are as a human. And something I recognized quite early is I can't say shit on here, but then not have behaviors that back that up off camera.
Yeah, exactly right. You got to practice what you preach at the end of the day. And this doesn't mean that you need to have a podcast to feel this way, guys. If you're listening and you feel like, you know what, I just want to be a little bit more accountable with what I say and what I think. And I really want to be accountable with how I practice that, so that no one can really second guess me and say, well, he says this, but he doesn't practice this way. You don't have to have a podcast to do that. You don't have to vlog to be able to hold yourself accountable. It can just simply start with your conversations with people. As if you just open up with your mates around you, with your loved ones around you, and you just talk about these topics that matter to you and matter in the way that you want to actually be as a human, then you can hold each other accountable just by doing that. And it's an absolute blessing, because it'll only make your life better and more enhanced. And it certainly has for us. I feel like my life and your life, like you just spoken about, is better for the podcast, because we're holding ourselves constantly accountable to our values and to our beliefs.
Exactly. And I think something that you can do with your friends is, if you have a sit down with one of your close best mates and say, look, I want to be better in this area of my life. And you tell them, I want you to keep me accountable. If I slip, I want you to remind me.
Yeah.
And that takes a bit of guts, in my opinion, because, sometimes our friends will let us get away with shit because it's easier that way, really.
Yeah.
But I think if you have that deep conversation with someone, you tell them, look, hold me accountable. If I say I'm going to go to the gym 3 times this week, but I only go once, message me, or, give me a little bit of a spray, you know? But it goes with anything. And I think the reason I've really liked this podcast is because I don't think I've had anything before that's kept me as accountable as this, right?
Oh, same.
And I think because of that, it's consistent. And this is not to kind of boost our own tires. Is that the saying, by the way?
Yeah. Pump up your tires.
Pump up my tires. Yeah. I'm not doing well with the sayings today, if I'm honest. But it's been an excellent vehicle for that. And
no pun intended.
Literally zero pun intended. I think find something that will keep you accountable, right? That's why there's such a encouragement that there's a huge social argument to getting married, right? People get married because it encourages them to have kids, and to have a kid means that you need to be a responsible member of society, and ultimately that's a net good for society. So That's a very extreme way to keep you accountable, but it's a means nonetheless.
Yeah. On that note, guys, thank you for joining us today. And if you've found this episode insightful, let us know. Send it to someone that you would think would enjoy it as well. And ultimately, thank you for your continual support. Happy Tuesday. Have a good week.